Hey there, and thank you for joining me. Today we have Arthur Gallant, who's 35 years old from Calgary, Canada. He's openly gay and HIV negative. So tell us when you discovered about being gay.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Michael. You know, big fan of yours. Really love what you're doing in terms of educating people. I really, wish that when I was, younger, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, that there was a resource such as your YouTube channel because, you know,
Such
there's
flattery.
still there's still a lot of stigma out there. And what's great about a YouTube channel such as yours is that, people might be uncomfortable and for a multitude of reasons. And so rather than not being, educated or kind of hiding, they can, watch a channel such as yours really in private. They can even like go into like the bathroom or something if that's where if that's the only sort of privacy that they can have. So, yeah, what you're doing is really great. So, to answer your question just in terms of how did I know I was gay? It's so hard for me to answer. Like, because hindsight is 2020. I would say, probably like when I was 6 years old, like I say that, looking back, did I know I was gay? Yes, but like, did I know the word for it? And everyone's like, well, how do you not know like the word for it? Like
Like to understand being gay at 6 years old is quite young.
yeah, it's very complicated. And
Yeah.
so did I know that like I was attracted to other men when I was like 6 years old? Like 100%. Like, I mean, this is gonna sound like kind of creepy, but like I remember, being like 6, 7, like 8 years old and like wanting to like be in the schoolyard and like hold my male teacher's hands. Or like I would like
Oh,
see, like they were like a little scruffy and I was like, oh, I want to like know what that feels like. And so,
wow.
but did I
That's
like feel the same way about women? No. I definitely had a closeness with other women. Like I looked at them as being more maternal, but in terms of
mm,
like this is like someone who's like good looking or there's something there. Yeah, I was probably as young as 6. And one of the things that made me realize that is I stayed home from school a lot as a kid, which could be like a whole other episode, but my mom kept me home from school a lot just because of she was taking care of my grandmother who was in the midst of declining health and no other family. And so for childcare reasons, it was just easier to keep me home from school and then take me to the appointments with my grandmother, or she was constantly getting hospitalized. And so what do you do all day when you're home from school?
right.
Is you watch TV. And the 90s were a wild time. Like I never understood growing up when I heard adults go like, "Oh gosh, like I missed like the 70s." And
Right.
now like that
Now it's the
I'm
90s. Yeah.
yeah, now that I'm like 30 years like removed from the 90s, I'm like, man, like that was like a wild time. Like gosh, I wish I could go back and relive that. And so in terms of watching television, like I was not a normal kid. Watched a lot of news, like never watched like Sailor Moon or anything, but watched some talk shows. And one of the talk shows that I watched, which is very familiar to you,
I just got chills.
yeah, which is the Sally Jesse Raphael show,
That's
or
right.
like I never really knew her as Sally Jesse Raphael. That was sort of like, I mean, everyone calls her that. I just knew her as Sally. And I remember
Right.
seeing drag queens on her show. They're like the best one ever is Charlie Hides, who actually like impersonated
Mhm.
Sally, and like to this day,
I watched a clip of that. You sent it to me recently,
yeah,
and I
it's
never seen it before.
hilarious.
It's fantastic.
For anyone who's watching this interview right now, if you look up like Charlie Hides, Sally Jesse Raphael, he actually has a video on his YouTube, or not on his YouTube page, on his Facebook page. You'll
Mhm.
just
I
like
can put it in
follow.
the description below.
Yeah,
You can watch it.
it's
A bunch of descriptions will be down there. Yeah, links.
people like fall over laughing. And I think what makes it so funny, and I'm sort of like spoiling anything, was like they played the theme music, which is
Mm.
just killer. And also, like a minute later, Charlie dressed as Sally hands a tissue to to his friend who's one of the guests, and like that was another thing. So I mean, it's just such a bang on impersonation. And so I mean, I saw a lot of, drag queens. I was joke like, and my friends joke like I'm like the worst kind of gay. Like I didn't even know who Bianca Del Rio was until like a year ago. Like I think drag queens are talented. It was just something that never really got into it. But now that I'm starting to do a little bit more research, just trying to find like, drag brunches and whatnot to be an ally, considering really everything that's happening in terms of, all the protests and whatnot, which is like, I don't remember that being a thing when I was a kid. So why it's a thing now, 30 years later, I don't understand. But the other thing was seeing the gay guests on the show. Like it was like Sally just humanized them. She normalized them, never made them uncomfortable. And when I look back, she could have gotten away with really feeding into the stereotypes. I even think about, your particular episode, the friendship that you had with Anne Marie. If you were straight, you could say that would have crossed some boundaries. And I think Sally could have gotten away with like saying to you, like, sounds like you two are close. Like, have you ever, maybe tried seeing if there's something more there? And no, 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 no. Like that was and so that I remember, watching her show as like a 6, 7, 8,
Yeah.
9, 10, 11, 12-year-old and being like, just like feeling like all these gay men were like my family. And it wasn't until, I really came out that I was like, oh, that's why. But there was just some sort of,
Okay,
you
let
know,
me tell you this with the audience that I was on the show, in case anyone hasn't figured it out. I was on Get Over It, I'm Gay episode of Sally, where a friend of mine, a lady, told me that she wanted to marry me, have my children, and I was engaged to a man. Now, the studio audience was filled with gay men. I know this is probably maybe they've seen what the show was going to be about, and then naturally, gay men wanted to go watch the show, that particular episode. But it did help a lot that they were, I want to say, loving to me, like overwhelmingly supportive.
gay men loved Sally.
Mm.
And so that was really like looking back, I could not have told you really maybe at the time as a young child, but like looking back, that was the thing that made me go, these people are like family. There's some sort of
Mm.
connection.
And this
Um,
means so much to you. You're at the age of 35 now,
I
and
am, I'm so 30 years later, really.
you're right. And then just recently, you got a tattoo, and I would love you to display it to everybody.
Yeah, so there it is. And so you can see all the different pairs of glasses.
I love it.
And the meaning behind it was Sally was famous for wearing red glasses. And so the message behind the tattoo is that she allowed me to see that it's okay to be gay. And that was something that actually, I mean, I'm like a longtime Sally fan. She, I think it was back in 2012, she recorded her own YouTube videos answering fan questions.
Mhm.
And I wrote in, I don't know how I submitted it. It's probably like through Facebook or something, where, it asked her, how did you feel about drag queens impersonating you? And she like gave a really solid answer. It was like a minute long, like really in depth answer. And I mean, spoiler alert, she said she loved it. But like I've been like a long time Sally fan. And so then a couple things happened over the past few years. Was during the pandemic, I think we were all like yearning for, something familiar and nostalgic. Whoever holds the rights to Sally still like dumped like probably like an over 100 episodes of Sally on YouTube. And that was around the time as well that you had posted your episode. And I just like binge watched
Oh,
it like
was
crazy.
it? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was around. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
I
I was
could
just like,
actually, to be honest, I recorded it on VHS when it was aired on TV. And then I had a fellow who could put it onto a DVD. And then I put DVD and digitalized it and then put it on YouTube. It's like a whole process, like holy, over the years.
so for people who don't know what VHS and DVDs are, there's a YouTube video to explain all about that. But oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh, what
Put
a
a
time.
link below.
Yeah, below. Yeah, and that just like made me, reflect on how much Sally meant to me.
Mm,
And actually like it's so weird how you can like remember random conversations you've had with people. And I remember when I moved to Calgary and got my first job, we went out like it was probably like maybe at the end of my first week or something, and
mm.
for drinks with my new supervisor and some colleagues, and they see all my tattoos, and they were asking me, oh, what's going to be your next one? I was like, I'd really love to get like a red pair of glasses in honor of Sally Jesse Raphael. And I was like, and I just never got around to it. But then the reason why, this tattoo, just to show you again, is so elaborate is like I had a horrible childhood. And being gay was a big component of that. And I did trauma treatment. And that was actually something that came up in trauma treatment. The lack of acceptance I had growing up in terms of being gay, all the homophobia, which if you want we can get into a little bit more. Yeah, and so I really was like, something just hit me and I was like, man, like I'm feeling like normal. Like I'm like, if it weren't for Sally, like there would have been a big piece of me that, was
And
missing.
that support right there, just on the television, right there
I
was
was on
that
television.
saved you.
Yeah.
And Sally was a big part of it, and that's fantastic. And I'm so happy you reached out to me, and we were doing this now.
Yeah.
I
So I'll just
understand.
quickly say that like I really wanted to, I'm like, okay, a red pair of glasses as a
Yeah,
tattoo to her, insufficient.
it
Um,
pride colors.
yeah, and so that's what it is. It's because she was
Yes,
famous for wearing red glasses, each frame
yes,
is
it's
different.
brilliant.
Yeah. And I actually, so I was like combing through all the photos of her and whatnot, and there is a photo of her on Facebook with actually like one pair of red frames and then like
Mhm.
a bunch of white frames. And so that was the inspiration for it. And I really, because it was so meaningful, this is my 16th tattoo, but believe it or not, I haven't been like tattooed in almost 5 years. And I purposely sought out an LGBTQ plus tattoo artist in Calgary. And so like I Googled, LGBTQ plus tattoo artist Calgary, and there was one who came up.
You found
And
one in
and
Calgary.
yeah, in Calgary. And if I and like not paying me for this, but his name's Mason Jenkins. And
A
and
big
you have to,
city. One, you found one out of that city, but
well,
that's
there's more than
fantastic.
one, but he was like the
Oh,
overwhelming favorite on Google.
okay. All right.
Like if you type in LGBTQ plus tattoo artist, there's so many Reddit threads that come up in other places
Okay.
where it's like Mason Jenkins. And so he has a form you can fill out online, and there's like a little box saying, what's the message behind the tattoo, and you can upload, photos as to what
Okay.
the
Okay.
inspiration is. And he said as soon as like he saw, he was like, oh my goodness, like I have to do this for
That's
Arthur.
amazing.
I don't think he's as big of a Sally fan as I am, but he's also but he understood. Like
Yeah,
she was
absolutely.
someone, he watched from time to time. And I'll just one quick funny thing about Mason is LGBTQ plus function last weekend in Calgary.
Mm.
And I'm believe it or not, I feel like some people won't believe this, but I am like very introverted when I go into like a big room like full of people I don't know. And what
Fair
one
enough.
do is when I break the ice is like if anyone has, visible tattoos, it's like, oh, who did your work? And I swear, like everyone in that room had been tattooed by Mason, and Mason wasn't even here. Like he had no connection to the event. It was
Wow.
like this, like,
Okay. Oh, he
oh,
was
I thought
uh,
it was great.
right on top of this Google search. Or was it a Google search you did or something, or Reddit?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Wow,
mean,
that's
yeah,
amazing.
it was great.
So you had the support from Sally Show and among other things, I'm sure, but you didn't. I understand you had a lack of support from your mother.
Yeah, I grew up in at least for the first few years, to give a bit of a backstory. My grandmother raised me. My mom was intellectually disabled, and I just want to really point out for everyone watching this is the behavior I'm going to describe from my mother. An intellectual disability doesn't make you that way, but because of how her brain worked, it was a barrier. Like her disability was a barrier. And so essentially, even though my mom was almost 40 years older than me, we were kind of raised as brother and sister. Whereas like my grandmother was like, the one
She
in
was
charge.
overseeing the whole, yeah.
Yeah, and then my mom and I were essentially equals. And then
Yeah.
like my mom didn't even, she wanted to adopt me actually. And my grandmother was like, no, 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 like that's not gonna happen. And so my mom said, so my grandmother essentially made a deal with my mom that, in exchange for like, hey, you two can like live with me, rent free. I'll provide you everything you need. Just, she had a walkout basement, so it was like our own little apartment. But I was baptized as a Protestant. I was actually baptized in a Baptist church, and then I think when I was like 5 or 6 years old, we moved to a Presbyterian church. But I just remember being like, I lived like, and I think maybe some people watching this can relate to this. Like, I lived in such a religious household that we had a pastor, like our church's pastor, or a member of his family over for dinner every Sunday night. Like it was either him, and I mean, I think maybe he would come like maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks kind of thing. But if he didn't come, he would send a member of his family instead, whether it be like one of his, kids and their girlfriends or boyfriends, spouses, like that kind of thing. There was always a member of the pastor's family. So yeah, so I grew up in a really religious home, and I was told from like 3, 4 years old that if I was ever gay, I would be kicked out. And I was also told that if I married a woman of color, because I could not be gay, that I would also be kicked out for that reason. So there was really, it was really ingrained in my brain from a young age that being gay was not okay. And I was actually thinking about this before we came on. Is I went to a public school in the West End of Toronto, and I think it was a grade 1 where we had a new principal come in who was openly gay, and parent council. I just like I know I was like 6 years old, but like they pushed back hard. I like remember there being, like just my mom talking about being like up in arms. I don't even think my mom was a part of parent council, but she found out there was but she talked to the other parents. So when she found out there was like this gay, principal starting who was out, I remember her, and I doubt this was true, but apparently like I remember my mom being like, he even has like a customized license plate that says like gay on. I'm like, so, but yeah, it
Oh
was
boy.
like I just
I'm proud.
remember like yeah, like I remember hearing like the other mothers like, like really trying to push back against this principal because they were scared he was gonna turn all the boys gay.
Come
And
on. You're born that way. Didn't they make a song about it?
Lady Gaga, great song. But
Yeah.
my mom passed away. It'll be 6 years this April, and
I'm
I like
sorry.
her and I didn't talk about my sexual orientation for probably like the last several years. But like she blames the principal like to really like up until the last time we really had like I don't even want to call it a meaningful conversation, but a conversation about my sexual orientation.
But
She
wait,
like
hold up. Wasn't there, I have in my notes here, there was another thing she thought about you being gay, is your father used to cross dress?
Yeah, and so to really fast forward, and I'm like, really, I'm sorry, I'm taking your like, your viewers on a bit of a roller coaster ride. Is when I was 9 years old, I was taken out of my mom's care and put into foster care. My mom was, physically abusive towards me. She was actually charged with assault, and I had to testify. I was called to testify. I actually didn't make it up to the stand, but I got like halfway up and bawled my eyes out, and like, nope,
Really?
we're not doing that.
Okay,
Oh
I didn't
yeah.
know that. So you were only 9 years old at the time, right?
So I
I
was
think.
9 years old when I was put into foster
Oh, but
care.
then you were 10 years old when
Had
you.
to when I was summoned to court. And so how I know what you just mentioned, Michael, actually right beside me, I don't even know why I have them out, but I have like a big like box like this big of like my child welfare records. And the reason why I have them out was I was using them to recover some repressed memories for trauma treatment because yes, it's great that they're repressed, but the brain is a very complicated thing, and I really needed to really get at what those underlying things were. And so one of
Yeah.
the things I read in my records last year, my mom was like really like on this quest with child welfare, with what's known in Ontario as children's aid, to like find out like why is he gay. And one of the things I read was like I don't even know my father. Like I had to like, take an ancestry test to like find out what my paternal background was, which it's Ukrainian. But one of the things
Oh.
in the records, like she was like, well, his father was a cross-dresser, Like, could that be why? And like, there was a lot of homophobia in the system, which you and I
Fine.
can, but even they like shot that down pretty fast.
That's terrible. I don't know how you survived through that. Being in a group home from 10
Oh, 22 group homes and foster homes to be exact.
and to the age of 18, I'm guessing, adult.
So, well, technically 16. So I was apprehended, what a horrible word. I don't know what other, like taken away, however you say it,
Right.
from 9.5. I was taken out of my mom's care. I was 1 month shy of 11 years old when family court made me the word has changed, but it was called a crown ward. It means that the government is essentially your legal guardian. So they were my legal guardian until I was 18. But when you're 16, you can actually take like children's aid to court and say, nope, don't want you to be my guardian anymore. But because they were concerned about my mom's ability to properly take care of me, we came to an out of court agreement that they would give physical custody to my mom while maintaining legal guardianship of me. So yeah, I was in 22 different group homes and foster homes from the time I was 9.5 to 16.5. So that's like what,
Wow.
7 years. Oh, and the homophobia. And you know what's funny, by the way? Like, I don't mean like funny, haha.
Yeah.
Is like, I didn't like come out until I was 13. But like in reading my records, they all knew it like the moment I was admitted. Like I was reading records from like the time I was like 9 years old, being like, this, he's gonna come out and he's gonna come out soon. Like they were like predicting
Wow.
like
Okay.
12, 13 years old. But what's also hurt, because there's also a lot of hurtful comments in the records about my being gay, is like it was from a psychologist when I was like 9 or 10 years old, saying that I was, and you're gonna love this, showing signs of homosexuality.
What are the
Reading,
signs? The stereotypical, what, feminine boy?
probably, yeah. I mean, I love the Spice Girls. I was wearing like platform shoes. Oh God,
Oh, and your interests. Right. Yeah. Like, yeah.
the amount of ingrown toenails like I had to get treated
So
because I
were
was
you too young for Madonna? She was a huge gay icon, music
yes
industry.
and no. I do remember like definitely I more of like the late 90s, like early 2000s stuff,
Right.
like
Because she
America.
was huge, or still is today, huge on the gay community and
Her
supporting.
rendition of American Pie, like that's all I remember, like on the radio.
Madonna, I just want to cover quickly about this because I did this on my channel. I don't know if you've seen it, but she received several awards from AMFAR, American Foundation for AIDS Research. Also, she was honored with a Lifetime Advocate for Change Award for GLAAD, which is the world's largest LGBTQ plus media advocacy organization. And this was in 2019. And GLAAD stands for Legal Advocates and Defenders.
I don't I think you and I spoke about this before coming on here as well. And like yeah, Madonna, huge work, and it's so great how multiple generations can be affected positively by what she's done, reducing HIV and AIDS stigma and just being a huge ally to the LGBTQ plus community. But however, as well, in addition to what Madonna's done,
Mhm.
is Sally as well was one of the first. I'm assuming, I believe, just from what I've heard, was also one of the first celebrities to come out and try and kick HIV and AIDS stigma in the butt. And how she did that is there was a teenager named Ryan White,
Mhm.
and he got AIDS through a blood transfusion in the 80s. And I don't know how. I think the reason I don't want to say I don't know how he became so famous. I think I do. It had to do with being kicked out of school or
Yeah.
something.
He was expelled from school. I covered this story. Yeah, it's quite sad.
Yeah, and so I was reading something not too long ago that said he never, had sought out the spotlight. He was on Sally's show. She said 4 times Donahue. I mean, that was sadly before I was born. But Sally said it's a clip on YouTube that she had Ryan on her show along with the AIDS quilt. And she'd done her research beforehand in terms of how HIV and AIDS was spread.
Mhm.
And, she had said she spoke to 4 research scientists and said, can you get it from hugging? Can you get it from, kissing, touching. Because I mean, there was just these
All those myths.
obscene
Yeah,
like, myths or whatever. Like you could get it from like a toilet seat or something.
right.
And so she learned you couldn't get it from kissing. And so she said,
Any of those
she put on
things. Right.
any of those things. So she said she, put on like the brightest red lipstick she could find and, gave him a kiss on the cheek,
That's
on
sweet.
her.
And it's sending a message.
Yes. And she said that so many people were scared for her. Like they
Isn't that
thought she
sad?
oh
And that's huge. What she did was huge for the gay
massive.
community and abroad, everybody, like just to put the education out there. Come
You
on.
know who did something very similar around that same time?
Mhm.
Um, Princess Diana.
Oh, I love her. Yeah, she did a lot of work in HIV AIDS around the,
Yep.
oh yeah, visiting aid
She
wards and hugging and kissing the AIDS patients.
She came to Toronto. There's a very famous picture of her. I believe it's Casey House in Toronto that I think they've brought in their mandate, but at the time it was, it was a hospice really for men
AIDS
dying of
patients. Yeah. Yeah,
HIV.
men, gay men mostly.
Gay
Yeah.
men. Yeah. And so there's, some very, famous pictures, but there's one in particular that I have in my head that I can see of her, just sort of like crouching down, kneeling down and
Yeah.
shaking, someone's hand. And I mean, they're horrible pictures to look at, just how frail and
Yes. Yeah, but she was there and showing the world that it's okay to love these patients and care for these patients.
and I had heard, or I'd
Right.
read rather, because I was even before I'd contacted you about my new tattoo, something had come up. I don't know how, but I just seen something and decided to delve in a little deeper into it. Where apparently she was just supposed to like go there really quickly for a quick photo op, and instead, she decided to go to like each patient's room and, have like a minute or two. And, where like the photo op was supposed to happen, she was actually
Yeah.
supposed to like be sitting on like the other side of the room in a chair. They
Right.
had a chair for her. And she was like, no, 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 no. Like she got all, like
Yep.
close and
Intimate close. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. And she wanted to send a message to the world, and I'm so proud of her. And the world lost a princess, truly, that fateful night. Since we're talking about HIV and AIDS stigma and people who are not educated in it, you had that at home, right here from your mother. Can you please share with us that?
I came out when I was 13. I remember calling my mom. I was living in a group home, came out to her, it kind of went how you think it went. Hey mom, I'm gay and she just got really angry and I remember it turned into a shouting match. We hung up the phone on each other and didn't talk for probably 3 weeks. And I remember asking her like why it wasn't okay for me to be gay. Like what is the problem? Like give me something tangible. And she had told me how she had a cousin who I don't even know his name. Not that I know much of my family, but never even heard of this person before. But she said she had a cousin before I was born who was gay and he died of AIDS. And in her mind, she associated gay with AIDS.
Right.
And so she, was pretty emotional and, just said like, I don't want you to die. She just believed that just by virtue of being gay, it was almost a guarantee that I was going to get AIDS and she'd have to bury me and I just remember like the pain in her voice of like it's the same kind of pain you hear when a parent, particularly a mother, actually like legitimately uses their child. Like I wasn't dead and yet it was already like the clock was counting down and it was counting down fast where she just got so overly emotional and was like did not want to bury me and like oh no mother should ever have to bury their child and like why are you doing this to me, like why are you doing it to yourself. No really amount of education that I think could really change her mind. However, to kind of make her take a step back is the group home I was living in. We had a family therapist that would meet with me individually, meet with my mom individually, meet with us both together. And they came up with a strategy unbeknownst to me. I don't mean it laugh, but it's so ridiculous and rooted in stigma.
Mhm.
Is they said to her, well, it's just a phase. And she just like lit right up, like,
Like gave
and
her
like
hope.
gave her hope.
Oh,
Just gonna be a few years.
Jesus.
Like, I can get through this.
Oh
Thank you.
no. No,
And
no.
so at 14 years old, she took me to like my first ever Pride parade. I'll never forget Pride of 2004 in Toronto. Time of my life. She was like, oh my goodness, this was like the Santa Claus parade to her. She was like she didn't care like that people were throwing condoms. She was
Right.
just like to her, it was like, oh my God, it's free stuff. Like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, she was just so excited. And so we went to Pride maybe two or three times. And then
With
what
her?
with her, yeah.
Okay.
And I still remember being like a little uncomfortable around her, but I think that's
Yeah.
kind of like normal for any teenager. Like I remember kind of sort of saying, "Oh, I think this guy's kind of cute or whatnot," or
Well, she
but
was
it
uncomfortable with you watching Will and Grace, for God's sakes, on
oh,
TV.
100%.
Like how
And she was passive aggressive about that. Like when I was like watching Will and Grace, she would never say anything, but whenever we had an argument, even if it was not about my being gay, she always brought up about like how mad she was about me watching Will and Grace. And so I always say that I had two coming outs to my with my mom. The first was when I was 13, but then, excuse me, when I was 18, she thought as soon as like my 18th birthday, straight now.
like
And
magically, yeah.
magically straight.
Right.
And I kind of played along with it for a while because it's like, oh gosh, like I don't want to have to do this again. But it
Oh,
really
I get
that
it.
I was like having to like be really sneaky. Like I was, this is like, but like I think Plenty of Fish was around, but like this was before any of the apps. So it was really hard to like, try and meet guys or, be on the internet talking, trying to meet people. I came out again to her just shy of my 21st birthday. And how I came out to her again was I was working somewhere and I was being targeted because I was gay or because I am gay. And my manager at the time had said she would have never hired me had she known I was gay. Like it used to be my rule that I would never come out till after my probationary period. People were making like homophobic taunts, and there just came a point where I was just like, F this. And my mom could tell like something's up, like mother's intuition, like when your kid's not okay. And she really like forced it out of me and was like, what's wrong? Like you have to tell me. Like she threatened to like lock me in my room unless I here I am like almost 21 years old. She's like, if you don't tell me, like you're not allowed to leave your bedroom until you do. And so I finally was like, screw it, here you go. And I think for her, like it was sort of like this like aha moment where she was kind of like, and I still don't think she understood like really the full like effect of it, but she was just like something did go off where she's like, wait a minute, like I think I'm kind of hurting my son. But it almost made her go like deeper into like the homophobia closet. Like she definitely stopped being so open about not accepting me because I'm gay, but yet it always came up during arguments or she would just really make sarcastic comments.
Undertone to it still. It was
Yeah, but
not.
there is one good thing that came out of it was she did apologize and asked how she could make it up to me. And she had gotten like back pay for something of like we're talking like 10 grand or something.
Oh wow.
And I was like, you need to use some of that money and take me to see Cher to Las Vegas for my 21st birthday. Like,
That's
if you
fantastic.
want to know how you can make up for all this
Yeah.
hurt,
Yeah.
never
And
seen Cher before.
Eric, a gay icon.
100%. And I
Yeah.
have to tell you, that was like one of the best times I've ever had with my mom. And fun fact is Diane Warren, amazing, songwriter. She won the Golden Globe on the night of my 21st birthday for the Cher song "You Haven't Seen the Last of Me." Cher
Oh
could not
wow.
be at the Globes to cheer on Diane, but she did come out on stage on Caesar's Palace and just tell us about the background of the song, how it got into the movie, and they
Nice.
wanted to take it out of the movie after she said she was only going to do burlesque. And that was, yeah. And so I look back at like the photo of my mom and I. There's a photo of her and I in front of like the Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign. And that was like one of few happy memories where I'm like, okay, if there's
Um,
something good that came out of the homophobia.
so 2019, was this that year? Share?
He died in 2019. So this was 2000. So Cher was 2011. That's when I turned.
2011. Oh, okay. Wow.
My mom became very ill in 2015 with congestive heart failure, was rushed to the hospital. They thought she had 72 hours to
Oh,
live. 4
Close.
years later, really not doing well, but she'd kind of tricked her doctors into thinking she was doing okay, and they were recommending that she travel, and we were doing a lot of traveling. And Cher was on tour. I think and I'm a horrible Cher fan for not being 100% certain, but I think it was the Here We Go Again tour. We were living in Hamilton, Ontario at the time. Pittsburgh's a 4 hour drive away, so it was like, you know what, instead of seeing Cher in Toronto, like Pittsburgh's not that far. We can get, a cheap hotel, and it was also Pittsburgh's actually an hour north of Wheeling, West Virginia, which is where my grandmother took me to watch greyhound races as a kid. I'm ethically against greyhound racing, but it is somewhere where I've gone several times just as a way of like remembering my grandmother. And my mom, 12 hours after we arrived in Pittsburgh, ended up, going into cardiac arrest. I still went to the concert, and some of your viewers might be like, oh, you know,
How could you? I don't know.
but you know
Oh,
what?
but
My
what can
mom,
you
like,
do?
I'm not even joking. Like, my mom never wanted me to miss out on anything, especially because of
Yeah.
her. So here she was, like, on life support. I was like,
There's nothing you could do. She was right.
back, and I'll tell you what I was afraid of. And I like say this like legit. I was like, her ghost is gonna haunt. Like, my mom's about to die. Like, she really is like, sign the papers like soon. Her
Yeah.
ghost is gonna haunt me if like because I think she didn't want to disappoint me, which is why she was hindsight so unwell to even go to Pittsburgh, but she was like, I don't
Yeah.
want to just.
Yeah.
And so I
But
was
she
still
held
a little,
on, right? Like she held on.
he
Like
held on. And it sucks that she wasn't at the concert, but I remember even the hospital going, because everyone wants to know, why are you guys down here from Canada? And when I said, we're here to see Cher, they're like, you need to go to the concert. I'm like, I know. And even when I was calling up some of her friends to let them know, like, what had happened, they were like, have you, like, well, did she make it to the concert? No. They're like, but you're still going to go, right? So it was
yeah.
the right thing to do. I mean, I was
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
it
But
was a
at
dark.
first, when you first hear it, you're kind of like, yeah, viewer might be, oh, what the, why would you be there? Stay with your mother and miss the concert. You know what I mean? No, no, I get it. And that's so
And I kept my
tragic.
phone
And I'm
on me.
sad. It's sad. My heart goes out to you and your
Yeah.
family for losing your mother. A mother and son, the love is like no other.
In her later years, she really did try to accept me. I did introduce her to two boyfriends. There is like a little bit of a funny story. Like the first boyfriend I'd ever brought home, it was a tradition that we would stay in Niagara Falls for Christmas. My mom didn't like being at home for Christmas because my grandfather had died in 1982, 2 weeks before Christmas. And then with me living in foster care, there was just this negative sort of
Mhm.
connotation with Christmas. And so for several years we stayed in Niagara Falls. And so it seemed like it seemed safer to, if I was going to introduce her to a boyfriend, to do it in a hotel where we had our own kind of room. Where so I got a room for my now ex, his name's Chris at the time, and there was adjoining rooms though. And so I'm like, you know what? I worked on Christmas Eve. He was coming from work, and I, text him and just say, "Hey, I've left your name at the front desk. I'm gonna have, a nap. Just, wake me up once you're here." And he woke me up by like throwing like a pillow on me, like, as like a pillow fight almost.
Mhm.
And I'm like, like, stop it, Chris, like, stop it, you bad boy, like, stop. And he's like, okay, like, I'm freaking out. Like, I just need to meet your mother. Like, call her so we can meet her and we can go for dinner. And so I go to call and she's in the adjoining room and we can hear the phone ringing
Freeing,
through.
yeah.
And he was like, oh my goodness, like, how much of that did she hear? Like, she's gonna think like we were doing it. I'm like, oh, don't worry. So we get into the hallway in front of the hotel rooms, and I'm like, okay, mom, this is Chris. Chris, this is my mom. And she was like, so it sounds like you two were, having a lot of fun in there. And I was like, mom, it was a pillow fight. And she goes like, pillow fight? Is that what you kids are calling it nowadays? I've never
I love
seen
it.
someone drink so much at dinner, man. He just looked like paralyzed and like he like as soon as we got to the restaurant, he just like said to like the host, like, I know you're not like our server, but alcohol now. And
You need to loosen up, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Oh,
And
mother next door could hear, well, God knows what else. Yeah.
Oh, and you know what though? And I remember her, he was spending Christmas with his own family, and he has like massive family, and he was not comfortable introducing me to so many people at once. And I also
Mhm.
wanted to be with my mom for Christmas. I remember like vividly we were at the casino on Christmas Day, and I remember her just very like subtly just saying like, "You picked a good guy." Um,
Oh,
like it was like almost like inaudible, but
yeah.
she
Yeah.
was
You,
like,
you
oh.
understood.
But and then a week later, him and I had an unstable relationship, and like a week later, he dumped me, and I was like, got he broke up with me when I was like in the parking lot about to like go into work, and over the phone.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
and
oh,
so I
wow.
ended up like saying like screw it, can't go to work, come home like bawling my eyes out, and mom's like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, what are you doing back so soon? You're supposed to be at work, and I'm like, dumped me, and she was like, I knew I hated him.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a place from like homophobia.
180.
She was like just being mama bear. So then a second boyfriend a couple years later that I brought home, his name's Jordan. She really liked him. She still knew like I sort of like was second guessing her acceptance and tolerance, that she ended up like making me like the butt of jokes. Like I just remember her like getting out like my baby album and like showing like pictures of like me in the bathtub
You
at
don't
like
do
11.
that. Oh,
You don't
come
do
on.
that, but it was like her kind of like, and like I said, I don't think that was malicious. It was just she knew I kept. She would say things like I said, the Will and Grace comments that
Yeah.
made me go, how accepting are you? So then she kind of went from, she overdid it in a way that was almost like embarrassing. I remember waking up one morning and they weren't in my apartment, and she was like, and I'm like texting him like, oh my God, like, were you two abducted? Like, what happened? And he was like, I got up to use the bathroom and she wanted to like take me to McDonald's for breakfast and I didn't know how to say no. And so I was like, well, that's good. But yeah, but then, once I broke up with him, then she was like, oh, see, like, well, maybe if you were dating a woman, well, actually, I didn't break up with it. It was mutual. She was just like, well, might want to try women. Like, maybe like you say you want stability and you
It
say you
doesn't
want
work
to
like
sort of settle
that.
down. Maybe a woman can kind of do that. And I was just like, no more, I'm not bringing home any more boyfriends. Like, to my mom, I guess. I became asexual. Like it
So you
was
haven't
very
dated anybody since?
I've no, and I'll tell you why. She took sick in 2015 and
Yeah.
I was like full-time caregiver. I really tried to kind of do like the dating thing and then was like, nope, like
So you were
yeah.
caregiving your mother for the 4 years?
Yeah, and technically I was always caring for her, but in terms of
Wow.
because of her intellectual
Yeah.
disability, she didn't have the capacity of more than like a 7 or 8 year old. But then when you bring the physical, thing into it, and I could have hired help, like there were even government supports, but I
Oh yeah,
was
PSW.
so protective of my mom that I was like, nope, like I
You were able
don't
to do
want
it. That's fantastic.
and then when she passed away, of course, I was needing to grieve. And then like my self-esteem went to crap. And
Yeah.
so it really only is now that, and what I will quickly say on this and not to overcomplicate things is I'm still dealing with the effects of my childhood, not with just the homophobia, but growing like living in foster care.
HIV. How much effect did that play? Like, how much did that affect your play about dating, meeting
So a
new
couple
partners?
is I've already talked about my mom, how she was like terrified I was going to get
Yes.
HIV and AIDS. But I will
Yes.
also say that living in group homes as well, they really instilled that fear in me. I was the only out one. There was a couple people that couple other LGBTQ plus people that came and went. But I remember being in one particular group home where we actually had sex ed and they actually called it sex, drugs, and rock and roll to make it sound fun. What they did was I had my own sort of sex ed is they, taught my peers, my straight peers, possible some of them might not have been like out at the time, but
Right.
they taught them all about STI,
Mhm.
STIs.
Mhm.
For me though, it was like HIV and AIDS, like really hammering like HIV and AIDS, like
Mhm.
and like you need to be safe. If not, you're gonna get HIV or AIDS. Like just because you're gay, like the chances of
Right.
you getting
Well, it's
are
the
like
highest risk group. True.
yeah.
But what year was
And
it?
2003, 2000.
2020. Well, there was life-saving medicines since 96. They have severe side effects, not
Mhm.
like they do today. There is side effects, but not like they were before.
So I caught on that I was getting like a different form of sex ed, and I was like, so why aren't I like learning about like STIs? Like, why is it so like focused on HIV and AIDS? And I was told because STIs won't kill you, like HIV and AIDS are. So that was one thing, is
True.
between my mom being afraid that I was going to die young by virtue of being gay because I'm going to get HIV and AIDS, my group home like workers who, really are professionals, like they've gone to school and whatnot to learn
Mhm.
how to, deal with kids in the child welfare system, they were also really hammering that. So that was like always in the back of my mind. Really, to get to your question, like where I'm going with this is that I believed for a very long time that it was not if I was going to get HIV or AIDS. It was when. Like I just remember, and I mean I always had safe sex? No. Have I had more safe sex than unsafe sex? Yes. But still, you always hear like, condoms can break, that kind of thing. And so I was worried, I've, always gotten, regularly tested. And so I just remember like the anxiety I felt that every time, I went to get blood work, like it was like mentally like
Yep.
bracing myself for
Yeah, I've
like,
been through that many times. Yeah.
I'm going like this will be the time. And this sounds bad. Like I never put myself in a position where, and I know you did a YouTube video on this, which I encourage others to watch. And oh my goodness, I'm a horrible person because I forget what the exact terminology. But there's people who purposely like put themselves out there to try and
Oh, bug
contract.
chasers. They want to
Okay,
receive yeah, the HIV.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I've
Yep.
watched that video of yours, and like I said,
Yeah.
so great. But I also remember, and I'll never forget this, is a guy on Grindr actually messaged me saying, I want to know what it like I have HIV. I want to know what it's like to infect someone. Um, it was like a
What?
for 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 him, and he's like, are you up for it? Answer's clearly no. But I just where I'm going
That's
with this.
crazy. I've had that too, where they wanted me to infect them. But you know what? That's not possible. I can't infect them even if I tried because I'm on medication and I'm undetectable, you know?
It's insane. Like I as a mental health advocate, I don't use the word insane lately, but
Yeah.
it's sickening, it's insane.
Yeah.
It just I'm not embarrassed to be gay, but knowing that there's like this sort of like subculture, if that's what we want to call it for lack of a better term, just
I
I
don't
just
understand it because if you're going to take medication for it, it's about $1,500 a month.
mm,
I'd be rich to afford that. There's no way.
yeah.
Thankfully, I have private insurance. Our government would cover the rest because my private insurance doesn't cover $10,000. That's all it covers is 10,000 a year. And I go way over that.
It's not something to be honest, like I spend a lot of time thinking about because I'm just like I don't want to give these people, the bug chasers or the ones who want to sort of be chased for lack of a better term. I don't. I know they're out there,
Yeah.
but thought about it too much, except because I'm just like, this is just horrifying. But what I do want to say is that, every time though, because it was instilled in me that it wasn't if I was going to get HIV or AIDS, it was when. Every time I got a negative blood test, I just felt like I was pushing it down to like the next one. So it's not happening now. Okay, great.
Maybe the next one.
But 3 months, and when like that's happening for years, it
Yep.
becomes like because you know what it's like, Michael,
Yeah.
like the
Absolutely.
mental like preparation like that you like the workup inside your head, it became just so exhausting. And so there did come a point where I would say that like listen, it's possible some of my coworkers, might watch this to become educated, so I don't want to say too much. I have needs, we all have needs,
Yep.
but it sort of worked out in which I kind of had an excuse to not be in a relationship, to really I had some intimacy, but didn't have time for very much of it
Mhm.
because it was just exhausting in terms of having to like emotionally work myself up to get tested. I knew like around that time, and we're talking, 10 years ago, that, antiviral medication was really starting to, become, effective and
PrEP was
whatnot.
not available 10 years ago.
I don't believe it was, but I know,
Wasn't
like, I think they were maybe doing like trial periods. Like, I do remember hearing something
right, but it
about.
wasn't available in Canada till the end of 2017. The reason why I remember is because I was diagnosed August 2nd of 2017. unfortunate. So a few months later, it was available.
Yeah. So and by the way, so grateful for that. I was sort of like partially abstinent really come 2015, but really if it weren't for PrEP, really to this day, like I would not.
In case you didn't know, PrEP is an oral medication you can take every day to prevent getting HIV.
I believe it takes 7 days to build up in your
Mhm.
system. You still do, I know when I get a 3 month supply at a time. And before getting my prescription renewed, you do have to still get blood work because there is like a very minimal chance. It's like super rare,
I
but
believe
it's
it's 96% effective.
I told you this before we jumped on here that PrEP protects my mental health just as much as it protects my physical health. And the reason why I say that is like, yes, like I know it's not 100% effective, but because of like the effectiveness is so high, there's just less anxiety. Like going for blood
Absolutely.
feels like more routine than it does like,
Mhm.
is this when I'm going to get bad news?
Right.
Like I think I always still have it like in the back of my head, like every time a condom's not used during sex, like I
Yeah.
still know I'm taking a risk. I
Well,
still
undetectable person and a person on PrEP together, there's no chance of getting HIV.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is something that, like I said, I thought really up until PrEP came out, that based on what my mom was telling me for a very long time and what my caregivers were telling me for a
Right.
very long time, that it wasn't, if I was going to get it, it was when, and and no one ever like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Some people ask like, well, about whether or not being gay was a choice, but they used the word lifestyle in the sense of like being gay was a high risk
I
lifestyle. Like
hate
it
that
was,
word lifestyle.
oh God, I mean, lifestyle is like going
Toast.
like clubbing every night.
Right. Oh,
Or
this is your choice. It's not. You were born gay.
And so, I mean, I was told by, don't get me wrong, I had some very homophobic caregivers, but even like the ones who weren't homophobic are like, you do realize like being gay, it's a higher, it's a higher risk lifestyle. And so they really, even these like less homophobic caregivers really wanted me to be like, how sure are you that you're gay?
But it just
Um,
puts a negative tone on just your sexuality being gay.
Yeah, because it comes, and the reason why they did it, like, and I hate also when people say like mean things and like this comes from a good place, but it for them it was like, like we support you, we're just worried about you, and are
I'm
you
sure
actually
that
gay?
that ship has already sailed. You wouldn't have come out otherwise. You know for certain because it's not a light thing to come out being gay.
No, and don't get me wrong, I did sort of wonder if I was bi maybe. It's actually something that um like I even grappled with up until like 10 years ago. Like, am I like 99% gay and maybe like is there like a
No,
little part of me
I think
like
sexuality is quite tricky.
it can
Can
be fluid, yeah, and
fluid,
and look,
fluid,
I'm
fluid.
I made out with a woman, there was no sex, and I was just like, oh, like it's not you, but I did not feel a thing. Like that definitely like
Yeah, I've slept with a couple women, and no, it's not for me.
yeah,
I'm sorry I did it because I'm actually better now because I know for a fact that that's not my thing. You said I could ask anything, and this is really
really can.
well. There's have you ever been molested,
I mean, I've never been molested. It took
raped?
me a long time to actually say that I'd been sexually assaulted because I believe I was drugged, and it was like, but it was with someone who I wanted to be intimate with. So it was like, wait a minute, like, is it still non-consensual if you would have consented?
Yeah, but you can consent, and then anytime you can take that away. And some people don't understand that. I don't know about it. We talked about this
Yeah.
before. I talked about people before, and yeah, you say no at any time, and that's no means no. That's it. Stop right there.
And it was actually with one of my boyfriends where like I was just, really anxious about having sex. One thing that I think would be, really relevant to your viewers and to this is that I was given sex education in the sense of like, here's how to use a condom. here are like the signs and symptoms of STIs and lube, that kind of thing. But something that I regret, and this might be a little too blunt, but like I said, you can ask me anything, and for me, sky's the limit in terms of what I'm willing to share. No one taught me what douching was. It makes sense, but I'm like mind blowing. Like there was no one to be like, I'm not a woman, but I assume like a woman or a mother tells their, female child, like, here's some rules about hygiene, being
Figure it
too
out
blunt. I learned that like the hard way. I was like traumatized after my first time. And so dating like this really, cool guy and like really wants to get in bed with me. And I knew what I needed to do, but I was also like traumatized. Like, oh my goodness, even though I've been hygienic and whatnot, what happens if it's not good enough? Or what happens if I didn't, wear the right, that kind of thing.
Is what it is.
He knew I think he knew, like I really wanted to do it. I just couldn't actually bring myself to do it. And so all I remember is being handed like a glass of wine, like, here, like, take a sip. I'm like, oh, I don't know, like, here. And I just remember like going from having like taken a sip to like waking up, mid penetration in terms of like me being the one like penetrated. Have no recollection as to what happened between like that first sip of wine to me waking up mid-act. And so that's what I'm saying is like it really took until, really a couple years ago.
You didn't like consent to that.
I did not. But the reason why I really grappled with that for as long as I did was I'm like, but I would have consented. So even though, because I wanted it to happen, but
it's coherent. But the thing is, you were drugged.
Yes.
You suspect or you were.
And I hear like a lot of survivors say this, but I'm like, but I loved him. Like it took me like a long time to be like, even though I wanted it to happen, the fact that I could not actually be the one to voluntarily bring myself up into the bedroom and say,
That's
okay,
right.
drugging is not okay. But it's not even like I even said to him, like, do you have something that could help relax me? There's like, these are legit things, as you know, but like numbing lubes, like there was never that conversation as to what do you need from me? Is there something at the pharmacy or like an adult store that we can, maybe like, let's figure this out together. So that was really against my will. And so it really took a long time for me to be able to call it what it was, which was like, I was raped, but it was just.
Yeah. It happens between husbands and wives, husband and husband. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter.
And so that in terms of anything, going back to the principal, and I really, what a horrible segue, especially if he's watching. But another reason why my mom thought I'm gay is because I was coming to school, to elementary school, with these marks on me. I was missing a lot of school, first of all. I think my record said like the school had said like one school year I'd missed like 50 plus days in a school year. So you think 50 divided by 5, that's like what, like 10 weeks or something? Like that's like essentially more than 2 months worth of school. I don't have a huge recollection of this, but I mean, I definitely know I was being beaten at the time. My teachers and whatnot had begun to pick up on that as well. I don't know exactly what the purpose of these like meetings were, but what I do remember is the principal would sometimes call me down to his office to have meetings. And I was like, 6, 7, 8 years old at the time. It was probably like, I think maybe 7, 8, I think 6 was a little young. He would also like, we had a routine where, a couple days a week after school, and I was probably there for like 15 minutes, door closed. And when we were done, I remember him giving me like a quarter, paying me. And I just want to be very clear for the record, is like, I have no recollection of anything mischievous happening. It's definitely suspicious. Like, I think if that kind of thing like happened now, like,
you'd be right in jail. Possibly.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I remember because his secretary, it was a very small office, but his secretary was like right aside. Like no one was in the office except for him and I. And my mom was not even allowed on school property. Like my child welfare records actually say that. Like my mom was not allowed on school property. It was just him and I. And so I'm leaning towards the fact that nothing happened, but like that was and it's my understanding in reading my child welfare records, he was essentially just trying to document what was happening, because this is the ridiculous thing, Michael. It's like, I don't look back at my time in the child welfare system. It was a horrible time.
I can
20
imagine.
years later, still doing treatment for, PTSD. However, the school was calling child welfare authorities 2 years before they actually apprehended me, like saying like this kid has, marks on
Right.
him, and
Marks.
we think
Yeah.
he's being, abused and whatnot.
Yeah.
And what I read was that child welfare, like they would apparently like, because my grandmother, like I said, was in the hospital a lot, in a nursing home. They would like apparently like come to our door and like knock and like no one answer, and they're like, okay, we'll just like leave and try again. And they always missed us because we were never at home. And so where I'm going with this is that the principal is clearly being frustrated because
Mhm.
I guess my understanding as to what these like meetings were between him and I, these private meetings, is he was trying to, yeah, meetings. But he was trying to build evidence. Like the
Yeah.
records say, like he was calling them every so often for 2 years and being like, this could result in this kid being killed. You guys need
Right.
to do something. And so I think that even though that would never fly in the face of today, like I said, I think it's super suspicious. Like he would like give me a quarter,
To
even though I have
do something,
no.
some kind of service.
Well, and you know what it was, Michael, if I'm being perfectly honest, is that even though I'm not alleging he did anything and I have no
Oh,
recollection of him
at
doing
first when
anything,
you kind of described it, it sounded, yeah, that way. But
but here's what I will say though, and I don't think there should be any disagreement on this. That was grooming behavior. You're paying me for my time, Ison. Why are
yeah,
you like you're having this private meeting with this 8-year-old where
no,
not even
yeah,
the
you don't,
secretary is allowed to be in the office? My mom is not, no legal guardian is allowed on school property. So
yeah,
we're having a 10 or 15-minute meeting for him to gather evidence, which is legit, but
yeah,
at saying at least have a teacher sitting in the office
yeah,
as a
a
witness.
secondary person, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So the fact that there was, and it's not like I trusted him because like it's the principal,
Yeah,
but
but it doesn't matter.
so, I don't want to, like, I understand these kind of like allegations are career ending, and I'm not making those kind of allegations except to say, looking back, like that was really suspicious and really creepy, even though
Right.
child welfare records paint a picture, provide context as to why he was doing it. And yeah, it's like the whole like giving me a quarter thing is what, like, to this day, I'm like, man, like that was the fact that this principal was openly gay, and the
Mhm.
fact that we were having these private meetings in which my mom was not allowed on school property,
It looks bad.
and that's what fed into her suspicion as to why I'm gay. Like she never blamed, like we've already spoken about this earlier in the interview about her saying, well, my father was a crossdresser. But I
Yeah,
really believe that to my mom's dying breath, even though it hadn't come up in years before her passing, I really do think she died, believing that he was at fault. And that's something that.
she'll never change her mind no matter what. There's nothing that you can do. We've talked about this earlier. Really, at least you've had the time together,
Mhm.
good times and bad, and that's it.
I
That's
will say one thing though, is that my mom and I, I didn't want to get into this just simply because it's triggering, but since you've already brought it up and I'm more than happy to discuss it, is that is one thing that my mom and I had in common, is that I was conceived because of rape. Really, long story short, she had moved out of her childhood home, either in her late teens or early adulthood, in what was called like a rooming house, like, or no, she called it shared accommodation. It's what we know as a rooming house. She had roommates, so they each had their own bedroom, but common amenities. And what ended up happening was that there was a guy, maybe there was more than one, but definitely my father, who don't know his name or anything. I do remember my mom saying she had got pregnant at least once before. And so what happened was my mom, got pregnant with me. And there was a lot of friction between her and my grandmother. It was, when that my mom got pregnant with me in 1989, because I was born January 1990. That's when my grandmother put out that offer to say, you know what, like you need to, because my mom wanted to give me up for adoption. She's like, there's no way I can, care for this kid, especially with my with my disability living in this house. And that's when, my grandmother, as a way as a means of saving my mom's life, was like, no, like you need to keep the baby in. And I'll tell you something really quickly, is you're probably wondering, well, how do you know that happened? Is whenever I asked about my father, my mom got like hysterical. We're talking like just like all red, screaming, like a very like
yeah,
angry, like in the
natural.
corner. And
Yeah,
I now know that that was traumatic.
because
And
yeah,
it was when I was a teenager that my caregivers had just said, you're smart enough to know this. This is our theory. If you care about your mom, stop bringing it up. And so I kind of was like, sort of settled on that. But it was after my mom died. It was actually during the pandemic. We were all yearning for nostalgia, which is
Yeah.
why I like to watch Sally. As I was driving, I would drive once a month from Hamilton to Toronto for my favorite Chinese food, which was, 5-minute drive from my childhood home. And I would drive down my childhood street just for nostalgia, to see my old elementary school, which was, like half a block from my childhood home, and see my childhood home. And it was one of our neighbors who was also a longtime friend of the family who had like known my family since the 70s. And I physically distanced, of course, but I, pulled over and just said, hey, I know we haven't spoken in more than 10 years, thought you should know my mom passed away. And that's when she said, hey, before your mom passed away, did she ever tell you the story of how you came to be? And I said, no, but I have a bit of a hunch. And she asked me what the hunch was, and she filled in all these blanks. And I kind of went, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And I called up a couple of those former caregivers who I don't keep in contact with them anymore, but I did at the time, and just said, this makes a lot of sense to me. This sort of fits in with your theory. And they were like, I didn't think it was something that I needed closure about, but like, and oh God, like, I mean, I've never really sought therapy for that, and I don't really think I need it, but I was like, man, like my mom was strong, like, holy, like crap, like she just like, I just was thinking about like what was going through her mind, like the first time she ever held me. And so I never told my mom about me being raped, simply because I didn't really realize that what had happened until after she died. And I don't think I would have told her if she were alive anyways, because I know it's sort of like a figure of speech, but I think it would have killed her. Like, I really think the fact that it had happened to her.
What's the motive? What's the point of telling her that? How would that serve you or her? So I get that.
If any sort of negative connotation in terms of with my being gay. So because I had sex with another man, she would have blamed, you were raped because you were gay. And so, yeah,
would not have served you at all.
Yeah.
It would have made it worse.
Maybe it's a blessing in disguise that I really actually didn't sit down with this until, and just kind of saying, and I understand not everything needs a name and not everything needs an answer, but I knew what happened to me was like, this isn't right. Like, I really want to be able to figure this out, and had some therapy and was like, okay, so this is what happened to me. I'm a survivor.
Yeah.
You
can talk about it. Anyone can listen to you talk right now and share your amazing story to everyone's got one.
And I have no
we're all unique, and you're not no shame. Exactly what you're saying.
And that was another thing to really, circle back. The reason why I contacted you in the first place is what I loved about Sally's show is like, there were, certain talk shows that made, gay men and drag queens and others really out to be freak shows. And Sally really tried to
humanize.
Humanize. Like, these are real people. And I don't know if you ever got what she sort of called aftercare, but she did say that what I noticed about her show was like the production value for like a nationally syndicated show was actually quite low. Like, the set looks so cheap. I don't know what it looks like in person. Like, the studio looks so
No, I didn't think it looked cheap in person.
Flashy graphics. But what she said is what she took a lot of pride in is how much money the production company put into aftercare, where there were certain guests that were on the show where like they would follow up with them for up to a year, that she knew that she just understood what it meant to be going onto like national television and spilling into your guts and talking about really intimate details. And there was a reason why people did that. I think all too well why people did it. I know why I would do something like that, but she really wanted to make sure that it didn't come across as like exploiting that yes, you're telling your story in front of the studio audience and on television, but we're really going to make sure that, you're taken care of. And that was something that I just think is absolutely amazing. She admitted it didn't come out of her pocket, but she just said,
of course,
it was something that
the sponsors, they make money out of it. Yeah.
And that the production company really insisted that if we're gonna, have these kind of people come on the show, we really need to make sure
there's certain guests that do require it, and they do it. Yeah. Responsible thing to do. And I respect that. It's
no use thinking of like what would my journey have been without her. It was hard enough being gay, but her and her show made it easier. And I, on that note as well, when we talk about sort of, normalizing, is I think of like what it's like to be at work right now. I work in a big office building, but my own department is, 40 plus people. And I just think of how I don't feel any different than my coworkers who identify as being straight. I don't feel like I'm different. I can walk around and, if I were to have a boyfriend, I did this with my boyfriend this weekend, or if I'm going on a date, yeah, I'm going on a date with this guy.
Just as if you're with a girlfriend, doesn't matter.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah,
and so there is,
that's fantastic.
I'm
Times
not,
have changed. I work in an automotive factory, and it's the same thing. I can talk about anything. Anyone, imagine in an automotive factory.
it's so great to like, there was a guy that met in person and we saw each other on one of the apps and, exchanged phone numbers and it didn't go anywhere, but for a month we were, talking a lot.
Yeah.
And I was sort of feeling a little euphoric and I had coworkers, checking up on me really every day going, hey, have you guys met up again? Where do you think things are going? And it was, I thought that was just so awesome. Like they didn't make me feel different. It came from a point or from a place of like, they genuinely care. They genuinely want to see me happy. And when I started to kind of, my gut was like, okay, I don't think this is going the direction that I hope it does. I didn't even need to go to them for advice. They just, sort of gave it when they said, hey, how are things going? And when I told them, they were like, they need to cut him off. And I was like, yeah, kind of. Sally was just so ahead of her time, like 30 years ago. And I do want to ask you a quick question since we are talking about this though, Michael, is that not to make you feel old, but you're slightly like, we're part of two different generations, but not by much. I looked it up. It's like just by a few years. But
Yeah.
at least my generation and possibly yours, like we didn't realize until really, we became adults that she was a gay icon. Like there's certain celebrities in the moment, like
Yeah,
Madonna, you mentioned Joe It's like that is
absolutely.
a gay icon.
Yeah.
We knew Sally was iconic. We did not know she was though a gay icon until like we processed our it's like years later. So my question to you, I'm willing to guess that you knew she was an icon at the time that you appeared on her show. Maybe you don't consider her a gay icon now, but did you know at the time that you were appearing, like, oh my goodness, like this is someone who is supportive of the gay community? Oh my goodness, I'm in the presence of a gay icon. Like, what do you?
No, at the same time when I appeared on the show, I was frequently going to the gay bars. That was a thing then. So a lot of gay men I've talked to knowing I was going on the show, and they were all excited about it, but I never really got the feeling of her being a gay icon, but all the gays loved her. I'll tell you that. So I guess does that make her a gay icon?
Well, and there's an article in Vice magazine from, from 10 years ago, and I was just reading one in Instinct as well, where it's like she's like an accidental gay icon where she was not considered a gay icon at like the height of her popularity. It was really like, long after her show went off the air, we're like, wait a minute, like
Yeah,
we
look
didn't,
back and see.
yeah, like looking, and I think that
So it was
like,
during the time of it. I was appearing on the show. So it was like they were more than welcoming for me and my fiance.
hmm.
They treated us like gold. So yeah, I can say that.
And that's why I think because she was so subtle and not in your face, that's why like I can't speak on behalf of like all straight people. I think I can say this about my mom is I don't think my mom really understood the connection I quite had to Sally. But my mom, just as I felt safe watching Sally, my
Mhm.
mom felt safe too because it wasn't, yes, there was drag queens on, but it like the gay themed episodes and whatnot weren't super in your face. It was so
Right.
subtle. So that's what I think was great as well, because unfortunately, when things like that is a little too in your face, it can
Yeah.
alienate certain people. And so while we kind of all knew, it was sort of like this like see, I don't even call it a secret understanding, but like this unspoken understanding, like, okay, yeah,
Mhm.
it wasn't just so out there where she wasn't on her stage like running around with, a pride flag, and yet we knew. I really think that the work that you're doing with your YouTube channel is such like a modern sort of version of that. Is I think of how comfortable I was watching Sally's show and how I learn things, and I think with YouTube channels such as yours and doing like these kind of interviews that it is sort of the new way of doing things. There's really only one talk show I can think of that does that kind of human interest stuff, and that's Tamron Hall. And I was
Mhm.
actually the audience for one of her episodes. It was called My True Crime Story, and
Mm.
uh, it was great. But really, that kind of thing now is on YouTube, and it's just so great that you gravitated over here and you're doing your thing in it. I hope I can.
I'm so happy that you were able to share your story with us here. And I mean, it's incredible that I just love my viewers coming together through comments, through video, through anything, and to reach out. We all need that in the end of the day, right?
I have a confession, and that was I was reading actually through the comments, about the Sally episode you were on, and I'd actually asked you a few questions a few years ago. I completely forgot about that. But Angelina from your episode, you were like, we need to do an interview. Angelina, if you were
Oh,
watching this,
right. Yes. Yes, Angelina. Come on. Get out there.
I would love like to get the
That
two of
would
you
be
together with
fantastic.
light.
Yeah, she has one. I'm on her YouTube channel. Like I'm subscribed. She had one video. Just one, and not her on it. It's some gay guy. It's a joke about some gay guy. I forget what it is. But she never got back to me. So,
I I hope like if she's on YouTube that this video will
thanks.
some come up on her feed. And I just want to say, like, long before we even recorded this, when I was sharing your channel with people and letting them know
Oh, thank you very much.
that we were going to be doing this, and people were like, "So, like, is it going to be live? Like, can we like, is it going to be a live stream?"
Uh,
But I didn't want to tell you this before we started because I didn't want to make you nervous, but there's so many people who are like, as soon as it's online, you need to send me the link. We're gonna watch it. Like I don't get starstruck, but to just meet someone who respects Sally as much as I do, like I've just been so looking forward to this because I know there's other gay men who really admire Sally, but
right.
while
Well,
I
I
don't
actually met her and was on her show, and
that's exactly it. So I'm like, Michael gets it. Like, I did not initially reach out to you as a way of getting attention. I was just like, this is someone who was on her show, really at like the peak of her popularity, especially, a gay themed episode. And I was
yeah,
like,
she was in the middle. Actually, they were. I think we were one of the last episodes aired there. They were changing studios, like renovating or something. I remember that. So yeah, doing a whole new look.
I do have a quick question for you. I know we're running out of time, but I've
Yeah.
been thinking about it. Were you surprised at how serious of a tone your episode was? Because it could have been like, I mean, my takeaway when I first watched it was like Sally's just proving how fabulous gay men are, and it could have been this lighthearted episode, but it was like more so of
It
like
got serious. And we had the therapist that came
very
on,
serious.
right? And I thought that was very important. The therapist, the sex
Mhm.
therapist, is that what you call her? She,
Yeah, Dr. Ginger something.
yes, Ginger Brown, I think, something like that. Anyway, she was thorough and she was very educational, and I felt proud of being part of that show for her even being on there and what she did. Yeah, because there was a seriousness. I thought Sally is a more serious show. It's not like a Jerry Springer or you know what I mean, like especially that Geraldo throwing chairs.
Like
Pardon?
there were a lot of lighthearted thing episodes that Sally did, and I could see this. I mean, my best friend and I, who she better be one of the viewers who was watching this, like we've been joking for years, like, man, we should go like on
Yeah,
a reality show. We say that if we were 15 years older and had known each other 30 years ago, like we
right
probably would have
during that time.
your episode because we just thought like let's show the world what the dynamic can be between like a straight woman and a gay man. And yet when
Right.
I watched it, I was like, I think it's your episode, like the tone of it is what makes Sally and her show legendary, but they didn't have to make it that way if they didn't want to. Like they could have
Right.
done it. It was just oh, like look at like a straight woman and a gay man who goes clubbing all the time and sleeps in each other's beds and look at all the fun that they have. And no, it was like, oh no, like these are women with boundary issues. Yeah.
No, it was all true. Like everything that was on that show was true. They made sure. And they
Mhm.
kept us separate. We could not talk. And at that time, there was no cell phones, right? We're in New York City, different hotels, different parts of the city before the recording. And we could not talk to each other until the moment I was on that stage.
I do have a quick question. You've never answered this in either of your two videos. What were you listening to on the headphones? Was it just like they were white noise? Was it
It was like
music?
electronic music. Yeah, it was like total deep bass. I couldn't hear anything. Trust me, I could not hear a damn thing. And they put me in, I
I
think,
would be like,
booth.
that'd be so hard. I'd be like bopping away. Like,
I
and I
was
did,
kind of
I did
bopping.
like,
And I
I
was
did
all
your head nod. But yeah,
Yeah. That's
she
funny.
did that a lot. You would hear on her show like, oh, this person's in a secluded area. And so
Great.
yeah, no, it was I hadn't watched your episode in several years, and it was actually not until after the tattoo I'm like, you know what, I better go back and watch.
Yeah. And,
I was like shouting legend, and I want to tell you is I'm like trying. I did not get this tattoo to get attention, but she's gonna be 90 soon, and I'm like
yeah.
trying to get her attention, and no
I,
matter what I'm doing,
I love the
has not
tattoo.
been successful. So, if I am successful in my quest to get Sally to confirm she's aware of my new tattoo, we'll
Mhm.
definitely have to follow up. So,
Thank you for taking the time to join us. We truly appreciate your story and we love that you shared. And I would love to have you on again.
a pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on.
Take care.